Hello, board gamers all over the world, and welcome to the Curious Box. Today, we have a very special interview. The other side is back, and this time, our guest is very, very nice creator, game designer, publisher, and he was behind one of the most famous games of heavy games of last decade, La Granja, and this is Andreas Odendhal. I hope I'm not uh, pronouncing it wrong.
No, it's fine.
Yes, I will call you Oda from now on because it's so much easier.
Th- Yes, that's very fine. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming to the Curious Box, Oda. Um, I saw you for the first time in, as you know, in Lady Con, while at the Veer show, and it was such a nice moment. Then that I was immediately curious about the things you about the things you've been doing. About also Pedro Silva told me wonders about you. So
Oh,
yes,
he's such a nice guy.
yes, he is. So so I was double curious about you and about the things you were doing. So I will start from the very beginning, because nobody was born with a meeple in their hands. So I want to know, how did it start for you? How did it begin? It was as a kid. It was later as a teenager. How did it start? This love for board games.
Well, in my childhood, we just played the normal stuff that is usual for German households, I guess. German family style games that are present in every household, which was basically chess, of course, and Monopoly and Yahtzee. And then there's a few traditional German trick-taking games like Doppelkopf. I don't know if you know the game. It's yeah, it's everybody in Germany and guess knows it. Except for Bavaria, they have different trick-taking games there. But yes, so this is basically what I did. So I was not heavy into gaming. It just a few family style games with my family and with my friends. I played trick taking games, but that was basically it. And yeah, so the big I started into the hobby when my wife and I were trying to check out a few games, and then we discovered this whole new world of games that we never knew, and that was the moment that we started looking into more games. And
Which ones were the first ones?
it was Settlers of Catan card game.
Ah, card game.
Yes, the card game for two players, and it was uh, we 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 bought the game and we checked the rulebook and we did not understand anything, so this was totally crazy. And so we shelved it because we couldn't understand, and then we played some other stuff like Skippo or Phase 10. And yeah, some at some point, my wife sat down and learned the rules for the Settlers card game, and then we played it, and it was like, whoa, there's games like this. Let's check out more. And yeah, so and to the day, the Settlers card game is one of my favorite two-player games. Yes.
Which other two-player games do you like? I'm asking you this on a personal note because I really really like games for two players.
Oh, you do. So basically, my favorite one is at the Gates of Loyang.
Yeah.
Although it is also for 3 and 4 players, but it is basically a two-player game that got a very weird three-player rule, and then it is a even stranger four-player game to make this two-player game work as a four-player game. And but yeah, Loyang is one of my favorites. Oh, let me think. I think what's it called? Seven Wonders Duels. I love that very much. It's a very good game. And of course, Fields of Ale, which is a really heavy game from Uwe Rosenberg. Really, really good two-player game. Yeah.
And from the time when you start discovering modern games with the Catan card game until the time you decided to maybe I could do something like this. How long did it take? How many years?
Well, it was. I think we started at the beginning of the millennium, roundabout. So I think my first spiel was 2001 or something like this, and it took me around about 8 or 10 years to start thinking about my own game designs and starting to sit down and actually make something. Around about 2009 was the first time that I had my first ideas, and then 5 years later, my first game was published.
How many how many prototypes have you done before your first game? You know?
I think it was 3 or 4, which is
Oh,
unusually low. Normally, from what I heard, it's around about 10 games that you have to design until you learn everything that you need to know, and then there would maybe pop up a game that is worth publishing. But I was very lucky that I had this really good idea for La Granja, and it also very lucky that it even got published. So yeah.
what before you were doing board games or you're spending your life professionally with board games, what were you doing?
I'm an assistant to a wheelchair driver.
Oh,
So
before go on.
I'm working for 25 years now in what it's a my it's an association that is formed from people with disabilities and people without disabilities, and they wanted to make it possible that people that have disabilities they can live on their own in their own homes and not go into homes or something like this. So to live independently, live your own life. That is basically what the association that I'm working for is trying to do. So the person that I'm working at is a wheelchair driver, and he's what's it called in English? I don't know. Paraplegic.
Yeah, paraplegic. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm his assistant. He's basically my boss, and I do whatever he cannot do, and I help him whatever is needed. So I do the whole thing from household stuff, cooking, shopping, grocery shopping, and of course the stuff that needs to be done. Um, Nursing, I think it's called nursing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, nice. Have you
So
ever thought?
showering and everything taken care of.
Have you ever
Not really.
thought about um, uh, doing games? Because sometimes disabled person, depending on the disability, uh, they well, there are specific needs that you need to accomplish when doing a game. For example, I'm thinking about that game. There is a game, uh, Nyctophobia for blind. I think it's for blind people, which is a
Hmm.
very nice game. You have to play it with your eyes closed. I think they even put a mask on your eyes so you can play it. And of course, there is this. Right now, more and more people are thinking about games for people who generally are not able to play the normal, let's say, board games. Have you ever thought about doing a game for a specific group? of people, or it never occurred to you?
Actually, no. The one thing that I am thinking about is that we might, at some point, as a publishing company, should offer our games with rule books in simple language. I don't know if you know the concept of simple language.
I'm not familiar. No.
It's basically a style of your language that is incredibly simplified, short sentences, very easy to read, and even people with learning disabilities can understand because the language is designed in a way that people can understand even complex stuff. And yeah, I think at some point we want to do a rule book in simple language, but I was never interested in doing such specific things like you mentioned, because for me this was always work, uh, and I'm doing a lot to help people with disabilities, and board gaming was always my hobby. So it's there's two persons. There's my hobby and there's my job, and I wanted this to be separated. Um, so actually, I don't want to think about my work when I'm gaming, and
It's an escape.
it at some point it was, but it's changed now a little bit because for 2 years now my hobby is also my job. And my old job is I'm still working in my old job, but only part time. So, but I still want it to be disconnected from each other. So, um, I think I did my fair share of helping people in my life, and I still want to do it, even though it's not my main job anymore. So, but I don't. I think there should be other people doing stuff like this. It's not my. That's where I draw the line, basically. You know.
Of course, it's perfectly understandable. Um, who did you play games when you were growing up, or even even older? Uh, your group was always the same, or it was you and your wife, or there was a group of friends? I'm not talking about now that you are doing it professionally and probably have tester groups and so on. But who were you doing it before with?
Basically, everything I did was with my wife. We played a lot, really a lot. We both were heavy into the hobby, and at some point we started to also meet friends who also like to game to play board games, and this evolved into having a huge bubble of friends uh, who are also into gaming, and that we sometimes meet for gaming. Yeah, but the main thing was always my wife and me.
And what can you tell me about your first prototype? How was what was the idea behind it, and how was it? Was it already a heavy game, or
Yes, it was a heavy one. So the main, do you know? It's an old game from Martin Wallace. It's called, what's it called? It was a Civ type game published by Phalanx Games. It had an action selection mechanism that was very cool. You had, I think it was 4 tracks, and to perform an action, you need to place a disc on one of the tracks. And the track was saying, okay, you do this action A, and the other track was action B, and the other track was action C and D. And in the one round, you would place the discs from left to right, and in the next round, you would take those discs back and perform the actions by taking the disc back, not placing one. So you have to decide in the first round which actions will I take, because I will take the same actions in the next round again, but in a different order. And I really loved this mechanism, and I wanted to try to combine this mechanism with a rondel, because at the time I really loved the games like Hamburgum and Navigador and Antique were very popular. And of course, you know them all because McGertz has a huge friendship with Portugal as well, I guess. Um, so his games were great, and I wanted to combine this mechanism with placing discs and taking them back with a rondel mechanism. So in the first thing you did was placing them, and then you would shift them around in the rondel. So you would not take them back like in the Wallace game. You would move them in the rondel afterwards, and sometimes even take them back. And this was the whole mechanism. And this mechanism was the engine for a tea harvesting game. So I was a huge tea fan. I drank tea, liters of tea every day, and I wanted to, because I was also a huge Uwe Rosenberg fan, and I loved Agricola and games like this, so these farming style games. And I wanted to design a game where you could harvest tea instead of wheat and so on. And this was a complete disaster.
Why?
It was way too long. It was too brainy, and I remember we played it for 3 hours and wasn't even close to finishing the game. And it was so raw. The game was so incredibly bad that up to this day, I apologize to the people who playtested it with, because the funny thing is they still like me. We are still friends, but I'm still apologizing, and they still remember. It was the first time one of my games was playtested by other people, and it was
But
horrible.
this is something. This is a story. I think every game designer has in the beginning, right?
Yeah,
I think it's part of the process, and it's important for beginners, especially for beginners, to know that it is a part of the process. It's not something you should be embarrassed about or afraid of, because
mm,
it most likely will happen anyway. And I remember the first time I took my first prototype to Lady Akon, just to show to some friends and stuff. And I showed it to Orlando Sa. I don't know if you know him. He's a
yes,
Portuguese
I know
designer.
him very well.
Okay, so I showed it to Orlando. I told Orlando, can you just take a look at my game? And the game was supposed to have 4 rounds. And after the first round, he said, "Okay, Pedro, let's stop here." First,
Yes.
the first round took 45 minutes just to play, without the rules. 45 minutes. If it has 4 rounds, the game will have 3 to 4 hours. This is supposed to be a family game.
Mm,
And if
yes,
I do
yes.
this and this and this, I always win. So, so so
Yes,
you see how it
it
went.
happens.
Yes.
Yes, it
And so
happens.
after that test, I remembered I called another friend with whom I was supposed to test the game, and I told him, "Man, forget the test. I have some things to change, and then we'll talk about the game in a few months again." And it was, of course, it was a lesson. And I think first-time game designers should always be prepared for that. It's not always easy to hear the feedback in the beginning,
That's true.
uh, especially after you were thinking that there is a masterpiece there. Uh, but it's useful, and we always learn a lot from the people, from the feedback. It's
Yes,
the,
it's one of the journeys that you need to learn as a game designer, that you get feedback. It will always destroy you because you believe in your game, and one of the most important lessons for me as a designer was that if I get feedback, first of all, I let people talk because it's always good. First of all, they did the hard work of playtesting a game, and so they are entitled to give you feedback and to full honesty. and I don't argue with them. It's the most important thing. Don't argue with the people that are working for you, playing your game, and give you their honest feedback. Don't argue with them. Afterwards, think about what they said, and take your time processing the feedback, even 1 or 2 days, and then you can make the best of it, and you might be able to understand if they even might be right, which is true very often. People are right very often about this, but you don't want to hear it. Basically, oh well, they trashed my game. It's not so bad. And after 2 days, 1 or 2 days, you realize they might have a point, and then you can learn from it. So I have seen play tests with designers who start to defend their games while getting the feedback, and it's always terrible for the playtesters. It's terrible because they are trying to give you a point, and they realize, oh, this guy is not ready for getting feedback. And also, it's not good for you because you get into your head too much, and will not be able to process the feedback. So shut up, listen, and process later, and learn from it, but don't argue with the playtesters. They are doing very hard job playtesting your games for you, and of course it's fun. It's always fun to play games, but still they work for you, and you should honor that.
That is true. I remember just a small story, a short story. A friend called me, "Hey Pedro, can you help me play testing this game for some friend? They've been doing it for 10 years, and alarm clocks sound 10 years doing a game." I was like, "Okay, okay, let's do it." So we were playing a game. It was very beautifully um, illustrated, and so it was a second alarm clock because generally when you're testing, you are not that worried with the looks of it.
Yeah,
Now it's easier because of AI and stuff, but back then it wasn't. And then we played the game, and the game had some really nice ideas. It was very, very long for a family game, and it had some problems. So I just gave them my feedback, and they rejected everything. They were two designers; they rejected every single point.
mm,
And then I understood why they were um, doing the game
yes,
for 10 years. Yes, yeah, yeah.
yes,
And the game is still not out, so I wish them the best. But yeah, that was an I learned from that experience a lot actually.
yes, yes.
So
You have to learn from the feedback. Yeah.
yes, yes, always.
Oh, but let me just mention one thing because I think it's important. You just said it's easier to craft prototypes now because of AI, so they look better.
Yes.
Please don't do this. Don't put AI into your games.
We are talking about prototypes. What do you
No,
think? Yeah,
still
it's a good
no AI into
it's a good question.
prototypes.
This question have been popping around in Facebook groups
Yeah,
all over the internet. Um, and I want to hear your opinion because prototypes uh, are prototypes. It's just an easier way to show something a little bit more pleasant to the eyes to a publisher. It doesn't mean the publisher is going to publish that art. They have their own artists and they will hire their own person. So,
yeah,
what do
but
you think about prototyping using the AI on prototype?
of course, then your game looks more beautiful, and people think that this is important to present it to publishers. It's not. No publisher will publish your game because it looks fancy. And the thing is that as soon as you put art into your game, it will spoil the look of people to your game. So they will not be able to give you feedback on the game. Very it deflects from the feedback of the game. So the game needs to work without all the art. It still can be a good game, and um, of course the feedback will get a little bit better if the players say, oh, it looks so nice, but at a prototype stage your game does not look need to look nice. It needs to work good, and people should give you feedback on this. And the other thing is, as soon as you have a publisher for that game, and they contact an illustrator to illustrate the game, if you transport your vision of the game using AI, the illustrator is also how do I say it in English? So
drawn to
the,
that kind of art.
yes, maybe drawn into that kind of art, and they cannot have an unspoiled look to your game and create their own vision, and that's very important if you want to illustrate a game. So they you will shift them into a certain direction using the AI art, and it's sometimes hard for an illustrator to look beyond this and create their own vision, and that's very important for the game because as a designer using fancy images in your that's maybe not the best idea because illustrators, they know how to illustrate games and they know how to do icons and they know this is their how do I
Job.
say it their expertise.
Mhm.
And it's most of the time it's not the designer's expertise to make stuff look good, and it's really a problem for the process of transferring a prototype into a publisher, a game that is you can publish. So the best thing you could do is not use images stock. Of course, you should do your icons and the stuff that is important for the game, but don't use fancy art in it. It's not good.
As a publisher, have you been facing this problem? I mean, are there a lot of people bringing you fancy looking games to
Well,
show you?
well, people are always using stock photos for their prototypes, and that's okay most of the time for icons and something like this. But yes, sometimes is art in the game that can even make the impression worse because, for instance, there's a background in the game that it looks like a landscape, and you cannot see the icons on it because they blend in. And of course, the designer has not the most professional printer, so it gets all blurry or something like this. So just leave the background out. You need to see the icons and you need to see what's important for the game and not the fancy art. Of course, it looks a little bit better, but sometimes it's even more problematic to learn the game because you cannot find anything. Is this a house or is this an icon? What do I do? You know, it's just blank pages. It's the best, and icons on it.
But now I'm asking you this one. I guess I now know the answer for it, but I need to ask it. Um, some illustrators, even professional illustrators, were doing art and very well known art for games way before there was this AI wave. They say they are using AI as a tool for making their art better.
Mm,
The thing is, there are some examples of game covers that you see they look like they were done mostly by AI.
mhm.
How do you see this? How do you see the inclusion of AI on the final product?
Well, there I was at how do I call it in English? It was a meetup of editors from German publishers, and 70 people were attending. So from all the German publishers, the editing people were at this gathering, and we had workshops and we discussed stuff, and this AI thing was also a topic. And we had a woman there from Deep Print Games. She is working for Deep Print, and she's artist and a graphic designer. And she held a workshop about this whole thing. And I think if you're an artist and you want to use AI, that's your thing. You can do it. If it helps you maybe transport your vision, if you want to do this, that's basically your thing. But if it's still the responsibility of the creative person that needs to do this, and if they don't want to, they don't have to. So this whole AI thing is basically it's in the world. We will never get rid of it anymore. So we have to find ways to deal with it. And if it's for these creative people, I think let them deal with it because I'm not a creative. I'm not an artist in the way of doing the pictures and drawing stuff. I'm the creative person behind the mechanisms and the rule book and stuff like that. So this would be my expertise, and this is their expertise, and let them deal with this themselves. And I know that many artists are strictly against it, and if they are against it, I'm not using it. So
All right. Okay, so getting back to your path. First game, huge game, and
mm,
huge in many ways. In not only the way it was received, and it's still so well played, even so many years after it came out, but because it's kind of a heavy game. But before we get no no, let's get there first. Um, so you like games about farms. We got that, and
yes, that's true.
I still have to understand this fascination um, of many designers to for games about farming and not that I don't like them. I like many of them, but it's curious. I would never imagine when I came into the hobby that would be so many games about farming and about natural products. We'll say it
Mm.
like this. And so, how did the idea come to you? The idea come to you? I I would guess from the mechanics first. In this case,
Mm, okay, this works hand in hand actually. So let me. So the first thing is that it's very appealing to many people. So you just like um, building up your own farm. It's something that people know from. It's a thing that is common knowledge, you know.
yeah, and it's familiar to people. Yeah,
And at the point that this started, I think the theme for games was basically all the time it was either Egypt or Rome or the Middle Ages. You know, this was basically everything. So it was a European city of some type. It was Firenze. It was Rome. It was all the Cologne. It was all the big cities that are there for so long. And then there was a Middle Ages theme about it. So and then these farming themes started, and I think personally that people were relieved that they could play something else for now, and it was a little bit different. So, for instance, Agricola was just wow, we can also play stuff like that, and that's fun and that's good. And Uwe Rosenberg is actually a good friend of mine, and we discussed it as this at some point why farming themes are so good for board games because if you have a farming game, there's normally some economics behind it, and you have a goods system. Um, and for example, if you take sheep, many as an animal in a board game, you can use the sheep to produce wool. Everybody knows why, so it's common knowledge. Of course, sheep they produce wool, and the thing is, you don't even have to kill the sheep to get wool. You can just build your pack of sheep, and then you will get this good called wool. On the other hand, you can um, turn the sheep into food. Then you have food. Everybody knows why, and you won't have wool anymore because now the sheep are dead. And this is something that is, everybody knows why. And at the same time, you have a very complex goods system that is explained not through rules you have to memorize, but for general knowledge. You know just what happens to sheep if you need food, and you know what you can do with if you nurture them. You get a big horde of sheep, and then you get a lot of wool in the game, and this means you can do this with other animals too. So if you have cows, you get leather and you get milk. If you kill them, you get leather and you get food, and if you nurture them, you get milk, which can also be food. Maybe not as much food as meat, but so you know the difference, and
Yep.
it's something that you don't have to explain. And in this way, you can design a game with a very complex goods system with many currencies in the game, and people will immediately know why this all happens, and it comes naturally. And it's a different when you have something that people do not have common knowledge about. For instance, if you have maybe computers and you have to build a computer, nobody knows about how computers work. This is not common knowledge, and you would have to explain everything. Or yeah, it's just stuff like that that makes the rules easy to access, and you have a nice scene because farming is very appealing, and you don't need to explain the difference between having wool and having food.
And so you did 4 games before, or I don't know how many, but many prototypes, and then Lagrange came. And how long did it take before you took it to a publisher to show it to someone?
I think that was around about 1.5 year when I approached publishers with it. And the lucky thing was that I met with a very small publisher, and he has the habit of signing games early on. So he sees potential in the game, even though he knows it's not ready. You might be able to publish it in 1 or 2 years, and he still gives you a contract and works with you on the games and then publish them. And that's very unusual, and he has to do it because he's such a small publisher in Germany. I know. I don't know if you know Spielworks.
Yeah, I know, I know.
Yeah, yeah. You met Uli at Lariacon, right?
I met Uli on last year on on the tram in Essen, just by
Oh,
chance. Yes, but
very
I
funny.
don't think he remembers me actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Uli contracted our game, and then we worked on it for another year, and then it got published. Yes. And I was very lucky because we were both Mike and I were first-time designers. We didn't know anything about game designing. We just got lucky. We had a good idea, and yeah, this was
Oh,
basically yeah.
see, you were designing games. I see. Yeah, most of your games are co-designs. Um, how did you match with Mike from the beginning? How did you see? How did it see? How did you see it? This happened. This. Uh, it was
Okay.
easy. It
So
was something natural.
we met at a booth in Essen, and it was 2009 when At the Gates of Loyang was published by Uwe Rosenberg. And we both knew the guy who started the publishing company for Hall Games. It's a small hobby project from a friend of mine, and I offered to help him. We weren't friends back then. I just offered because I knew he would start a new company, and I thought he might need help in Essen to explain the game. So I offered to help him, and he said okay. That's very nice of you. Let's do this. So I explained At the Gates of Loyang at Essen to people, and it was fun. And also, Mike was on the same booth, working to explain at the Gates of Loyang. And we got to talk. We realized that we both started designing games, and we developed a friendship. Of course, he's from Switzerland, and I'm from northern western part of Germany, so we are about 600 kilometers away from each other. But the internet was already there, so we could have emails, and we talked about our designs all the time. And at one point, he said, "I have this game here. It's influenced by Race for the Galaxy, and what was this other game that he had? I don't remember anymore. Oh, it was. I guess it was. No, it was not Race for the Galaxy. It was Roll Through the Ages. Yes, and so we started. He started designing something like this in the vein of this, and he said, "I don't have an idea how to proceed with the game. I'm basically stuck in my creativity." And he asked, "Do you want to take over maybe and take a look at the game and see for yourself?" And when we discussed this, we met in Germany at a gamers convention, and we played Glory to Rome together. And I really loved how the card mechanism in this game works, that you have 4 different uses for each card. But I hated the game. It was totally unbalanced, and it was swingy like hell. But I loved how the cards worked. And when I got Mike's game to have my own thoughts on it, I completely redesigned it and put this card mechanism into the game, because I thought, I love this card mechanism, and I want a game that uses this, but that is to my liking, because I didn't like Glory to Rome back then. I made my peace with Glory to Rome. I love it to play it. So it was my first impression of this game was, no, it's not for me. But I started to design a game that uses the cards in the way that Glory to Rome does, but was totally my type of game, because I wanted a game with this mechanism, and there wasn't. So I completely redesigned Mike's game, and I put new mechanisms in it, and also I put new theme on it. So I made it a farming game because that was what I was playing back then. And it made more sense to me to connect the dots in this game using a farming theme. So yes, and when I sent Mike the game back, it was already a very early version of what you know as La Granja. And so we decided to co-design the game then. And basically what we had from this time on was 2 games, because I completely redesigned his game to be the farming builder, how I called it back then. And we still had this other game that he called Dice for the Galaxy, was the name of the other game, because it had this roll and write kind of style in like roll through the ages, but it has a sci-fi theme. So we had 2 games, and Mike said, "Okay, let's work on your game and let's work on my game." And so we have now 2 games. And we said, "Okay, let's do this. We are co-designers of both of the games. And I work on the farming game, you work on the sci-fi game, and we give feedback to each other all the time," and so on and so on. So at this point, we had 2 games. The one was my farming builder, and the other one was Dice for the Galaxy. And my game became more serious a little bit earlier, so Spielworks decided to sign it. And then for a period of around about 1 year, we only worked on what later would be La Granja. And when La Granja was out, and we had our dream fulfilled, that we are the designers of a game, we got back to Dice for the Galaxy, which was also our co-design then, which we agreed on. and this would become Solaris mission.
the next game.
Around 2 years later, Solaris mission was published by Spielworks as well. Yes, and that's why we designed two games together. Yes.
And, uh, uh, then Lagrange became uh, bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, it became very well known. What do you think were the main reasons? I mean, besides the familiar theme, of course, but it's still a heavy game. I know it was a different market 10 years ago,
Mm.
and but why do you think? Why do you think it became so well known? Besides being, because sometimes it doesn't. It's not enough to be um, a good game. What made
Yeah,
it
so
so big?
I think, to my personal opinion, there are three reasons for the game to become quite uh, known. The first thing is the dice mechanism. It's a dice drafting mechanism, and this was basically new back then. There was one game out at the time that had a similar mechanism that it's called Seasons,
Mhm.
and it also has a dice mechanism where you draft the dice, and then one die is left, and this has a meaning. In Seasons, it was how the progress of the game um, was determined by the last die that you did not take. And then basically Lagrangia came out, which had a similar mechanism of dice drafting, and this was completely new except for Seasons. And since then, more games came out with this. So I don't know. One very popular is Grand Austria Hotel, also dice drafting game, and many, many more. But this was basically something unique back then. And also the multi-use cards is, I realized, is something that not only I really like, but many, many people like these meaty decisions of I have four cards in my hands and I can play them in 20 different versions, and I need to decide if I want to use the card this way or this way or this way. This is very interesting stuff, and this was basically very lucky because it was something I loved, and I didn't realize that it's something that so many people also love. But yes, and I think personally, I did it, or we did it very well in this game. This is one of the games. If you want multi-use cards, Lagrangia is your game. It's very good. And I say this with also knowing that this was out of pure luck. It was not intentional. It was not a mastermind idea in my head to design a game like this. It was just pure luck. And we got lucky that the game had so many mechanisms that many other people also liked. And then the last reason is basically how the game is structured for me. Are you still there? I cannot see you anymore. Pedro. I just wait for him to come back. Drink some coffee, maybe, from my beautiful Plantanubo cup. Uh, you cannot see it, right? It's a Plantanubo coffee mug. And the last thing that I think was helping the game is its structure. So normally, when you play a heavy game like this, you need to know every rule, so that because you have options to perform actions, and you need to know the whole thing. You need all the options, and you need to learn all the rules about this game, and before you do your first turn. And Lagrangia is a little bit different because you have a round structure that is basically you do this, and then 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 do this, and then there's the scoring phase, and you do this. And you can basically, after a short explanation of the game, you can start going through one round using the playing aid and going from top to bottom and learn the game, or even relearn the game, which is also very important, just by using this playing aid. And it helps people to come into the game very quickly. And then you play one or even two rounds, and you said, okay, now it clicked. I know the game now, and it's very accessible this way. You don't need to know everything at the beginning. Like, for example, if you play Solaris Mission, there is so many different options, and you need to know every option before making an educated decision to perform an action. And in Lagrangia, it's different. The first thing you do is play a card. Okay, let's play a card. Let's see what happens. Then you get income. Okay, I get some income. Then you can play a roof. Oh, I can buy a roof. Okay, I have the money. I buy this roof. Let's see what it does later. And later you realize, oh, I don't have that good, but I have this roof. Oh, I can use the roof. Okay, so you learn the game by playing the game. Of course, you need some of the rules, but you can basically learn the game very good. And after 2 or 3 rounds, you get the grip, and then you can finish the game. And it's also helping to relearn the game. When you put it on the shelf for 2 or 3 months, and then get it back on the table, you have this playing aid, and you say, okay, I can do this, and it helps you to get back in the game very quickly as well. And personally, I think this is one of the reasons why people like Lagrangia so much, because not only of very interesting mechanisms, but also the accessibility of this game is very low.
I have a couple of friends. They always do to every game. They always put the rules in one sheet, like it's like a big player aid, but they also adapt the design, the graphic design and the illustration of the base game, so it really looks like an original piece of the game, and it's so much easier to get again into the game when you
Yeah.
haven't played it in 1 year or 2 years. With that, it was such a great idea, but it's a lot of work uh, for them. But I totally understand what you mean. Yes.
Mm.
Um, Oda, you were talking about working with Spielworks, and I'm curious, since you said they take the design because they are a small publisher, even though they are now quite well known. They take the game in the early stages, and then they help you develop it. And how was this process of developing the game with a publisher? In this case, with Spielworks, since it was your first game, your first to be published game. Was it easy for you and Mike? Uh, what parts were you still doing alone, and how did it how did Spielworks come into the process of designing and developing the game?
Yeah, so the way Uli does this is basically he gives feedback, and then he lets you deal with the problems. So he says, okay, there's this and there's this and there's this. I want, I think you should go into this direction and change it accordingly, and then he lets you do it. So he's more like giving you guidelines where to go, and then you have to change it and play test it, and then you come back together a month later or so, and then you play test it again, and he says, okay, good steps, and let's do the next step now, and stuff like that. So this is basically how he operates, because he's only one guy and he has not the capacity to work on so many games that he publishes in detail. So he lets the people that designed the games do the stuff themselves, and he just gives you guidelines where to go. And at some point, he says, "Okay, the game is now ready. Let's publish it." And depending on the designer skills, sometimes it's better, and sometimes not so, um, or not as good. Just like this, I don't know. And sometimes you just get lucky, like Mike and I did. So that was a very funny thing that Uli once said to me. Because Lagrangia is by far the most popular game he published. and he said the game is way too successful, and this was very nice to say. He did not expect this at all, and so didn't we, and we had a lot of fun doing it, and it. Yeah, like I said, it came out 2014 and it's still available. I know that now that's deluxe edition, which also not every game gets, and it seems like Board and Dice thought, okay, there's some potential even after the game was not available any longer. So we do a deluxe version, and this was also very nice. And now the game is out in such a beautiful version as well. So yeah, we really got lucky.
How did you in the end after La Granja came out? Um, what changed? What changed for you? I mean, on the way you approached publishers, or were they approaching you? Now, you
Yes,
and Mike. What
it's totally
changed
different.
after that?
Well, what changed was so the game came out 2014 in a very small edition, only 1,000 games, and they were sold out within 2 weeks. Um, and then there was a time when no games were available, and Spielworks planned with other publishers that they should do more games, but they wouldn't do this themselves. So no new Spielworks version of the game, um, because that's basically the publishing concept of Spielworks back then was we only do a small amount of games and that's it. And if there's a need for more games, other publishers should do it. So when the game came out in the summer of 2014, um, there were only few games, and people talked about them, and they really liked the game. And then there was a new edition, 2015, in English, in another German version. I think there was a Spanish version, French version. So all of a sudden, the game was had a wider audience. And then in 2015, at Spiel, there's something, I don't know if you know this, a German board game magazine does this scout thing, where they all the new games could be rated by people, and then they do a ranking of the new games so that people can see, oh, this seems to be good. Many people rank this very high. Let's take a look at it. And in Essen, 2015, La Granja was basically new to people because it got published 1.5 years before. So and just a tiny small edition. So it was a new game that also some people already knew it was good. And then La Granja won this scout ranking. So at the end of the fair, La Granja was on the top of the list,
So,
and everybody see, oh, this game seems to be good, and that was very helpful because after that, I didn't need to approach publishers any longer. They came to me,
yeah.
and this was totally different. So on the very day, I remember it was the Saturday in Essen. I had 8 meetings with publishers who asked me on the fair if I could come by their booth and maybe talk about new projects. And I remember that I had the prototype of what later would become Cooper Island with me, and I was showing it to 8 different publishers, and they all wanted the game. And that this changed
Wow.
dramatically.
Yeah, really. Yeah, amazing. And so, did you guys feel any pressure while doing Solaris mission? Because it was next game after the big one, after such a success. You probably were working on it before La Granja, but but was there any pressure? Did you feel any pressure? And
No, because it was just a hobby for us, we just made the next game. This was. I had high hopes for the game because to this day I still enjoy playing Solaris Mission more than La Granja. It's basically, if you ask me which of the two games I want to play, I will pick Solaris Mission. And it was very disappointing that it yeah, to this day there's only 1,000 games. So this game was really not as successful, but I like it a little bit better. But it's one of the games that you have to know everything before you start making educated decisions. And then we found a publisher who wants to publish the game again, and they did a Kickstarter campaign, and the company went bankrupt during this. So this game was funded by many people and was never delivered. So many people lost their money, which was very sad. And of course, for us, it was very sad because we wanted the game to get a new edition, but it never happened. So it was very disappointing. And yeah, so we with Lagrania we got very lucky, but Solaris Mission was basically very frustrating and a huge disaster. Although the game is actually I like it even better than Lagrania, but it's also a little bit heavier, you know.
Yeah. Uh, you keep doing heavy games. Have you guys ever thought of doing a smaller game or a lighter game, or is it's not on your plans because it's not what you like to play usually?
No, I like to play smaller games, and I think that No Siesta was a little bit lighter. It was a I really love roll and write games, and back then again there were not much roll and write games. It's
Yep.
not understandable if you look at it today, but because there's roll and writes everywhere. But back then there was basically two good games or so, and one of them was Roll Through the Ages. I think I have it over here. Oh yeah, Roll Through the Ages was a very good roll and write game, and I loved it. And I wanted to design a game like this, so a very strategic roll and write. And it came out 2016, and it still was. There were not much roll and write games, and the roll and write hype started 2 years later. But by then, No Siesta was already very rare and sold out, and nobody knew it. And it was basically a game that came out before the hype, you know. Yeah, but it was a little bit lighter than all my other games. And now this year, I'm going to publish a two-player game of mine, and it is also lighter than my normal games. It's still a heavy two-player game, so it's not a two-player game like you know this from the smaller. Normally, two-player games are very simple, and this is a big um, complex two-player games compared to other games. And yeah,
So
it's
before we
it's a
get
little bit it's a
yeah,
little bit lighter than my other games.
before we get to that one, I you talked about Cooper Island, and everybody knows Cooper Island. It was very well received. But I want to talk a little bit about Plantain Nubo.
Yes.
That's how it's pronounced. Um, I saw it last year. No, last year at Essen. Yes,
Hmm.
it was last year. And it came to my attention, of course. Not of course. Actually, it came to my attention because I saw the book first.
Oh, you did.
Yeah, the book was on some table somewhere, and I just thought it was so beautiful that I at first I thought it was an RPG or something like that, but then I recognized the name of the game because I heard about it before, and then finally I went to check on the game, even though I haven't played it, and it's a very different concept, and we'll get there, but it's also the first time that I know, at least, that you and Mike work with someone else and with a friend. How
Mhm.
was it to incorporate Uva on this team?
Well, Uwe is a friend of Mike's and mine, so we both know him personally. And at some point, I already said that Mike and I got to know each other explaining At the Gates of Loyang at Essen. And At the Gates of Loyang is a very special game to me and also to Mike. And he started to design a dice version of At the Gates of Loyang. And at some point, we playtested it, and I gave him some feedback and so, and he was working on it. And at some point, also he started to approach Uwe about it. He said, "Okay, I have um, this dice Loyang game. Do you want to see it, or is it okay for you if I do something like this?" And he said, "Oh, okay, let's talk about it." And then Mike and Uwe started working on the game together. So Uwe had it for a couple of months and did his version of the game, and then it got back to Mike and so on. So and at this version that came from Uwe, I play tested it together with the guy from Hall Games, so the original publisher from Loyang, because of course Uwe and Mike approached Ralph for a dice version of Loyang as well. But the game was not. It was a game for two or three players, not four players, and it was very very long. It was about 3 to 4 hour game, and it was not there yet, but it had very interesting mechanisms. I liked it, but there was much work to be done. And of course, I again gave Mike feedback very much, and I criticized many of the elements of the games. Although I liked the core mechanisms, it was a game about dice placement, which I love, and of course farming and so on. I liked that very much, and also it also had this polyominoes in the game, and I'm a huge puzzle tile laying fan. So this basically combined everything that I love in games. So tile laying, dice placing, goods harvesting theme, and so on. I really loved everything, but the game was mechanically it was not as good. So and then I told Mike all this, and he was developing the game at that point. And then he said, "If you know everything better, why don't you do it yourself?" And then I said, "Okay, I can give it a try." And from that moment on, we designed the game as a 3 piece. And then I did my version of the game, and I gave it back to Mike, and then he worked on it. And we also already had a publisher who wanted to give us a contract for the game, but finally they rejected the game. And this was basically the same time I started my own company. And after the rejection from the other publisher, I told Mike, "Oh, why? Let's do it ourselves at my own company." And that was when he agreed on it, and Uwe was, of course, on board as well. And then Uwe said, "Okay, if you want to start a company, let's do it with one of my games, so you have the attention of many people." So we started with Applejack, which is a tile-laying game from Uwe. This one. And this was the start of the company. And 1 year later, we published. Oh, you have it as well. Very nice. And 1 year later, we published Plantanubo then as our second game. And yeah, this is how it happened.
How is it to publish a game? Um, what what's new? What was the biggest surprise when you started publishing a game, or and what's the biggest reward besides the control? I think.
The biggest surprise, I think, was how incredibly hard it is to do the rulebook and working together with an illustrator and be in charge of everything. But also, don't get me wrong, this is incredibly fun. It's really cool, but also it's exhausting. Plantanubo has 28. No, is it 28 or 32? I don't know. let's just say it has 32 pages rulebook, and wow, this was some kind of work, and we made so many mistakes with it. It's incredible. We are lucky enough to have De Beer as a partner for an international edition of the game, and we showed them our English rulebook, and it was horrible. And they redid the whole thing. Thankfully, they did a great job. Do a complete overhaul of the rulebook, and it was needed because it's really hard to write a rulebook for such a complex game. And I learned my lesson. I need to get better at this, but yeah, this is very hard. It's not only, at some point as a designer, I say, okay, here's the game. Now it's your responsibility to do the illustrations, to write the rulebook and stuff. And for Plantanubo, I did this all myself, of course, with help of friends and my game builders partner Torsten. He's also very good at this. But yes, you do so many mistakes, and it's a process. We will get better, but Plantanubo was really tough to write the rulebook. Yeah.
Do you see yourself doing games only for you to publish, or are you still going to do games for other publishers?
No, I will still work with Spielworks. So we decided when I started doing my own company, I thought it was a good idea that so I could make it as make my living from board games, to have two different things: my own company on the one hand, and on the other hand, board games that I just give to somebody else and finish this. So I can get more games out. I have to work hard on this, and a little bit. I get the hard work for the other games are done by other people. This was basically the idea. So, and I trust Spielworks completely. We have a very good um, relationship, and Uli lives just 20 minutes from my home, so we can meet on a regular basis. And he's a very nice guy. We became friends over the course of the last years, and I can always ask him if I need some advice as a publisher. So this is very good. So I still working with Spielworks for new games, and the rest of the games will be published by my own company.
Where what kind of games are you as a publisher, as game builders? What kind of games are you looking more for? Heavy games, or what what kind of market are you aiming to?
So with the game builders, we basically do two different things. We have very small games that are good for the book market. So in Germany, if you go to a bookshop, they also have different things. So it's called non-book stuff, like coffee mugs and all the other stuff that you can find in bookshops now. And also they have many games. And we started to publish games that are very good for small bookshops or bigger bookshops. Let me show you something here. Do I have it over here? No, I don't have it. Okay, so there's a small game called Tinder Blocks, which is a very small game in a small box. And we published this, and there's another box in this vein. Oh, let me just show you. I have. So this will also be our next release. Can you see it?
Yes.
It's a small card game, very good for bookshops, and it's really fun. It has cute animal illustrations on it, and this is perfect for bookshops. So easy to pick up, very simple rules and stuff like that. But we don't design them ourselves. This is basically we localize them from other companies, and they are a very good fit for German bookshops. So we're doing this, and also we're doing bigger games, like games for the hobby market, and these are basically the other games. So like Applejack is something in between, maybe you can say. Sorry, but Plantanubo is a really huge experts game. So We want to do the huge games, and basically the stuff that we design ourselves, that will be more like hobby games, like Plantanubo, Sunavalo, and so on.
Very well, Oda. Before we finish, I want to talk a little bit about the next game.
Yes.
Suna Valo. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah. Oh, let me
Oh,
just
there's a
check.
cover there.
Can you see it? Can you see it?
Yes, we can see. Oh, it
Oh,
looks
there's a name.
amazing.
There's a name. Sunavalo.
Which is Sunny Valley, right?
Yes, it's Esperanto, and it's called Sunny Valley in English. Yes.
Okay, so from your words, we know that it's a two-player game, not that not that family level game. So a little bit
No.
up. What can you tell us more about that? Because I'm very curious.
Well, it's a two-player game, and it will be in the same box as Applejack. The prototype. The prototype we did is glued on an Applejack box. It's the same size, and yeah, it's basically a card game that feels like a board game. And the main mechanism is that every time you get a card, they will place it in your personal area, and all the cards have to be in columns. So all the green cards get in one column, all the gray cards get in one column, and all the orange cards are in one column, and so on. So if you get a card and it's a green card, you place it in your green column, and then you activate the whole column. So at the beginning, you have not many cards in this column, and the more cards you play, the more powerful this column will get. So and then you're producing goods. Like in a farm. And of course, you have to deliver them to complete contracts and earn victory points and stuff like this. And then there's 6 different columns that you can supply with cards, and then you can activate the column and so on. But this also, if you have one of each card, there's also bonus. So you don't only do the whole column, you also do a row, and then you get bonuses from the row. So this is basically what you do with the cards, and the very interesting thing about how you get the cards is how you pay for them. So you have to imagine that it's a 2-player game, and I have my playing area in front of me, and there are 3 cards in front of my playing area, and those cards are accessible to both you and me. And you have this as well in front of your playing area, also 3 cards that are both accessible to us. And then there's another set of 3 cards on the game board in the middle. So there's 9 cards. And if all the cards in front of my tableau, they have resource cubes on them. And the resource cubes are basically the price you have to pay for the card. So if it's my turn to take a card, I can get one of my cards that are in front of my playing area, and I simply discard the resources that are on the card and put them in the common supply, and then I get the card. If I buy from your card, because you have 3 cards as well, and maybe there's a grain and a wool on the card, these are the costs, and I want this card, I have to pay the grain and the wool to you, and you get my resources and the resources from the card into your personal supply. And then I get the card and I place it in my column. And the thing is now that you are missing a card. You only have 2 cards left, so you need a new card for your playing area, and you have to pick one from the middle and place goods on the card that are coming from your supply. So if you get a card in front of your board, you are the one who determine the price. And if you want to make it very costly for me to get this card because you want it, you put a pile of resources on it to make sure I'm not buying it. And on the other hand, you might take a card that you hope I would buy, and then you put a price on it that you hope I would pay for it. Because every time I buy a card from you, you get lots of stuff from me. And this is basically the dynamics in this game, that if you buy a card, it depends from where you buy it. And that's a very interesting mechanism.
It
So
really
it's
sounds.
basically it's not a very hard game. It has very simple structure, but of course, like it is in games like this, um, the thing that you do with the card when you place it on your board, this is where the complexity gets into the game.
Yep. Oh, the two last questions. If you, as a publisher, if you had infinite resources and you had, you could, there was the possibility of doing your dream game based on an IP or not, what would that game be?
So the thing that I want to do at some point in the next couple of years is to design my personal engine building game. So I'm a huge Race for the Galaxy fan. It's the best game. It's a pure engine building, and it has great mechanisms. It has so many cool combinations of cards, and you can do lots of stuff. So you build combos, and you have a really cool engine building in the game. It's a pure card game, and it's one of the best games I know, and it's one of my favorite games. And I want to design a game like that. Not the same game, of course, but a really cool game that is card, where the contents of the game is in the cards, that you build very cool combinations of cards, and you build up your engine. And yeah, I want to design a game like this. This is my pet peeve.
And how do you see, how do you see game builders and yourself as a designer in 10 years?
Well, hopefully we can make a good living out of the company, and we'll be able to design to publish the games that we design ourselves. This is basically what I'm trying to do now. You know, because as a designer, you can also make good money from it, even from my level of. So I'm not the most famous guy. I did some decent games, but um, it's hard to make a living of just designing games. You know, it's different if you Stefan Feld or Uwe Rosenberg, then you can. Well, everybody knows these guys, and I'm not that. I'm not this. So I can make a decent amount of money of my games, but not enough to make a living. And what we are trying to do is also include the money that publishers make with the games. So this is basically a little bit more normally than designers make. And so I want to get this on the one hand. So not only get the money that designers make, but also get the money that publishers make. And yeah, let's see if this works out.
Oda, it was a great pleasure having you here, talking with you. I could we could be here for a longer time, actually, because there are always when we talk about games, about board games, there's always another topic, and always another
Yeah,
topic,
sure.
and always another topic. So thanks a lot for coming to the Curious Box. It was a great pleasure. We've been postponing this for ages, and it finally happened, and I'm very glad it finally happened. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and it was a pleasure meeting you in Portugal, and I hope to be back next year.
Thank you.
Maybe that we can
Guys,
play test one of your games.
yeah, maybe it's possible next year. It's possible. It might be possible in Essen. Let's see. Let's see how it goes. All right.
Oh yeah, that would be nice.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you all for being there for another walk to the other side of board games. This time with Andreas Odendhal. game designer, and also game publisher at the Game Builders. It was a great time being with him and also being with you. So if you have any comments to do, any opinions, share them on the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. As always, we are here at the Curious Box, and I hope to see you, as always, at a table close to you.
Bye.